Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be looking at surface pressure and how Lin-Manuel Miranda structured these lyrics, right? So we are looking at how the rhyme schemes work, how the piece is organized, what kind of tips and tricks he used to create this piece. As far as like interpreting the piece, we're not going to go deep into the lyrics, but let's go ahead and dive on in and see how he did it. I'm Dr. Zach. Grab a cup of tea and join me. All right, so I once again am including some of the labeling from Genius lyrics because it's a little bit different than what I labeled. If you can, go ahead and check out the Waiting on a Miracle piece because I think that one doesn't really fit with like a verse chorus kind of label. It's really interesting how that one all works together. But for this one, I do think verse and chorus kind of work. I think this whole first part is an introduction. Now it's different from Genius Lyrics. Genius Lyrics called that verse 1, which is in that parentheses. And the thing is, we don't ever get this kind of musical material back, right? We have the I'm the strong one, I'm not nervous, but then under the surface, a flaw or a crack, pressure like a drip, drip, drip. Like none of that stuff really fits with this musical material. So I would say that this is more of an introduction, okay? So again, when we're talking about music theory, the introduction is the label, and then I just gave you the evidence for why I think that's an introduction, right? Giving the reasons why is what you really want to be doing when you're talking about music theory. So I say this is an introduction because we don't have any of this material coming back. Also, in the previous two songs, we've had introductions in those, according to my analysis. So by having an introduction here, that would make sense. It seems like the kind of pacing of this movie is that, we have the dialogue, and then in order to get into a song, we need an introduction to kind of get us into the flow of the song. And that's like a really good technique, right? And it seems to be what Lin-Manuel Miranda is kind of defaulting to here. We get a first verse. So I say that under the surface kind of marks our verses. Since this is different, Genius Lyrics said this was verse 2, which is, completely reasonable if you want to call this first part verse 1. And then I call this part a pre-chorus, where it goes a flaw or a crack, the straw in the stack, because it gets us into our chorus, and we also have a different chord. In here, we have a B major chord, which is the 5 of E minor. This whole piece is in the key of E minor, with the exception of the bridge is in G major, which we'll get to. So by having a new chord here and having all that energy build up, the B major chord being the 5 or the dominant chord of E minor gives us that kind of tension where we want to resolve to our E minor chord here, which happens in the chorus. So Genius Lyrics just called this part of verse 2. Then we have our chorus, which is pretty self-explanatory. If you know what a musical hook is, like this is it. Basically, it's like the part that you always hear on TikTok most of the time. Lin-Manuel Miranda is really good at writing these. I mean, this chorus, it just is so iconic. And even the verses, the under the surface line is like sticks with you. The pressure, like it's so easy to remember all this stuff because it's really well written. All right, so after that we get verse 2, which Genius called verse 3, makes sense. And then we get the pre-chorus again here. Now, this is where you might want to call this pre-chorus part of the verse, right? Because we don't get the chorus after this, we get the bridge. And what I'm kind of saying is that this is like an expectation, right? He's setting up the expectation for the chorus, but then he denies that expectation and we get the bridge. That's something that's really common in music. You set up the listener to expect certain things, and then you deny those expectations. It's actually what makes music interesting to listen to, is all these different kind of things that don't go quite how you expect them to go. So that's why I'm still comfortable calling this a pre-chorus. Yeah, a little more evidence for why it doesn't quite I think, fit with the verse is because we have this under the surface thing, right? Very, very clearly structured here. Under the surface, line. Under the surface, next line. Under the surface, third line. And then we get 4 lines that don't have under the surface. And all of these lines rhyme with each other. Crack, stack, back, back. So that's a very tight and strong rhyme scheme there, right? Just A. Even rhyming these last 2 lines are almost exactly the same. The only thing that's different is that and what, and then we'll get to this it's in a little bit when we talk about the rhyme schemes. So that's why I think that this really is a different part of the song. It's not just a continuation of the verse kind of tacked on the end. I think this stands alone as its own section of the song. And then just to finish, we have our chorus, right? So we have the expectation of the chorus set up, but then our expectation is denied with the bridge. And then we go just straight into the chorus to finish it off. So the bridge is kind of like our little detour that we took before finally landing on the last chorus. And Genius Lyrics agrees here, bridge and chorus, like I think all of that makes really sense as far as labels go. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the rhyme schemes here. Of course, Lin-Manuel Miranda is just a wordsmith like genius when it comes to this type of stuff. And like genius is kind of a loaded term, but I feel like he really deserves that kind of title because all this stuff is like there are rhymes in here that you wouldn't find in a like rhyming dictionary. It's great. So we have I'm the strong one. I'm not nervous. So nervous and earth is our rhymes. So that is really awesome for all those people that say you can't end with a preposition, right? Well, this is maybe a reason why you would want to because we have that rhyme there. And then we have churches, right? Earth is, churches, worth is. All of these rhyme. And it's really cool because then since we have just like an A rhyme scheme, he varies it up by doing this earth is and worth is on every other line, right? So we have single word and then 2 words rhyming, a single word that rhymes, and then 2 words to make up the rhyme. There's a pattern here that is, I think, worth noting. In the next line, we have work is and surface, right? We have some of that similar sounding vowels between the two. And then we get a departure from this pattern. Now, this again, when you establish a pattern in music, you want to look for these departures because that's kind of a signal that something else is going to happen. And something else does happen. We get into what I'm calling verse 1. So our departure is that platinum doesn't rhyme with surface or work is. Demanded doesn't rhyme with anything that came before it at the end line. But in order to make these lines strong, what he's done instead is he's done these internal rhymes. Diamonds and platinum, I find them, I flatten them. Okay, so we have platinum, platinum, and then I take what I'm handed, I break what's demanded. So there's our departure from the pattern that was set up. Instead of rhyming our end lines with all of the same vowels, we now are doing internal rhymes on these last 2 lines. And that departure from the pattern gets us into verse 1. So we have rhymes that work all the way down here. This is where the pattern kind of stays, right? We have all those end rhymes that work, and it even works with surface. Surface, circus, Cerberus, service, right? And this is actually something that's kind of interesting about the word surface because I say it with like an I kind of vowel on the last syllable. Surface, is. But you can also pronounce it as surface with an vowel, right? And both of those kind of work, which is really strange. I had to think about this. And even if we like listen to a pronunciation on Google, right? It's spelled Fuhs for that last, so it'd be like fuss. But then the pronunciation sounds like fist. Let's listen to that.
Surface.
See? So it's spelled F-U, which you think would be pho, but then is the computer's pronouncing it as like surface.
Surface.
Like that. So it's kind of like, well, which one is it? And I think the answer is both. So you can rhyme surface, surf. So you can rhyme surface with circus and Cerberus, but then you can also rhyme surface with service, right? So it's kind of like using the duality of that vowel to make all these rhymes work. Very interesting, kind of like quirky English rhyming thing here. It's great though. I mean, none of this feels like it doesn't belong, right? There's none of these words feel like they really stick out, except for maybe Cerberus, just because that's kind of like a unique word, and you need to know a bit about Greek mythology to understand the reference. But as far as like if there's a word that's sticking out because it doesn't sound like it rhymes, no, all these sound like they work. So this is where you might have a little bit of evidence to say, well, since all of the introduction or verse one has these AAA end rhymes, and then we have AAA end rhymes for the next verse, right? That would maybe be an argument for why we have verse one, verse two, rather than introduction, verse one. I still think since we have this departure here and under the surface is such like a unique part of the song that it deserves to be called its own section. This is the verse with under the surface, and then what came before it is the introduction. Then we talk about the pre-chorus where all of it rhymes. Thus far in the piece, we have had only like a end rhymes. Everything's rhymed with kind of what comes before it in that part. With, of course, our little departure being the one exception. So let's see how the rhyme structure fits in the chorus. And if you're also wondering, like, oh, well, if we need a departure from, what came before in order to get us into a new section, what departure do we have to get into the chorus? Well, we have a new chord. I don't think B major appears before this, so that's a bit of a musical departure. Lyric-wise, we have an exact repeat of a line, with the one exception of that and what. Now, this it's that I said I was going to talk about, I believe the it's really kind of belongs as a pickup to the chorus, okay? So technically it's part of the pre-chorus, but it doesn't really like function as the rhyme end for the pre-chorus because we have that breaks the camel's back. What breaks the camel's back? It's pressure, right? So that it sounds like it's really leading us into the chorus. So I would not count that as part of our like end rhyme. Like you might be tempted to say, oh, well, the departure is that we have the it's at here. So it's actually A, B, right? We have the one thing that's different. But I don't think that is a clear explanation of it because what you really hear is the back and the back. That's what kind of sticks out. And then it's is what takes us into the chorus. So the departure is that we get an exact repeat, and then it's pressure like a drip, drip, drip is where we go on. So then we get into our chorus, and the presentation is significant, okay? So let's look at our rhymes first. We have stop and pop, that's easy, AA, older and shoulder, BB, and then we have ball and fall, okay, CC. Now, once again, I think that this two here at the end is not what we're end rhyming. And this really is helped by the music, right? Who am I if I can't run with the ball? If I fall to pressure, right? It's that two kind of belongs to the next part of the chorus. It's not really what we're end rhyming. We have a longer note on fall, so that's what's being emphasized, right? And of course, with that, since we're expecting that rhyme, that's what we're kind of listening for, and that's where it sounds like the line end kind of is, within the pickup being the word to. So then we get go and blow, and we get stronger, longer. So A, B, B, and then C, C here. Now this one's really tricky. We'll talk about it in a second. I just wanted to point out that Genius Lyrics says the post chorus begins after this last whoa. Give it to your sister stronger. But we have that same thing in the previous stanza. So it's like, why would all of a sudden this one be different? That one I wasn't quite sure about. So I just wanted to point it out that Genius Lyrics thinks this is the post chorus, but I don't think that's the case here. Okay, so I mentioned that the presentation was really important. And this is why. We get these woes at the end. Those I don't really count towards end rhymes because they're just like vocal sounds of the song, right? They aren't like contributing any vocabulary to us understanding what the song is about. But woe rhymes with go and blow. So if he had done the opposite, if he had put this second kind of part of the chorus first, it would not sound quite as good as putting it second. Because having go rhyme with woe and blow rhyme with woe makes that a lot stronger, right? So what he does is he starts with the weaker kind of rhyme schemes here because stop and pop don't rhyme with woe. And then when we get to the second part of the chorus, it's a stronger rhyme. That's the way you want to do it because the other way around, it would sound kind of strange to have the weaker rhymes come after the stronger rhymes. All right, so let's get to this falter rhyme. Now, if we were to look up words that rhyme with all, falter does not show up, at least in Rhyme Zone, which is one rhyming dictionary that I like to use. So here we have the 2-syllable rhymes for all that I typed in. And if we get down to F, we have fair ball, fastball, football, footfall, right? Falter doesn't show up because it doesn't the whole word doesn't rhyme with all. Now that's also true for things like football and footfall, but nonetheless, like I think it's because the rhyme comes at the beginning of the word that it doesn't show up in Rhyme Zone. So how does this work, right? Who am I if I can't carry it all? If I falter under the surface, it's the music. So by emphasizing that first syllable, which also is the accented syllable in that word, falter. We don't pronounce the word falter, it's falter. So we have that all rhyme, we lengthen it in the music, and then that makes the rhyme work. Who am I if I can't carry it all? If I falter under the surface. So the ter is so de-emphasized in the music that it really makes this last rhyme work. Really cool. This is what I'm talking about, how Lin-Manuel Miranda is like a wordsmith because he came up with this, even though maybe like that would show up in another rhyming dictionary. One source isn't, the most reliable for making a blanket statement, but like that is just really neat how that works. Okay, and so then in verse 2 we get the same kind of thing where surface hurt us, right? So surface hurt us, surface iceberg is. So we're rhyming berg and is there, right? Sir berg is. And if you're singing this, you might want to kind of take note of how you're pronouncing the surface so that you can match like the end rhymes here. Then under the surface, I think about my purpose. We get a little bonus one there. Can I somehow preserve this? So surface, serve this, right? We're rhyming these parts of the line. So this is something that Lin-Manuel Miranda does really well, and you can sometimes hear it in other popular songs where you are rhyming the vowels, and that's the most important part, right? We have some of the consonants don't quite line up to make it that really strong, kind of exact or perfect rhyme, but we are rhyming the vowels each time. So we have the same rhyme structure here, all of it rhymes, A. And then here in the pre-chorus, we get, again, a little bit of a departure. So before, remember, it was just A, but the last two lines were exactly the same. Here we get A, dominoes and blows, and then we have tumbling, so there's a B, right? And then, but on and on it goes. So this is A, A. So a brand new rhyme scheme. We haven't had this before. It's either everything's rhymed or it's been in kind of couplets, A, C, C. And this now we have A, A. So I played with the idea of instead of calling this part like a pre-chorus, calling it like a transition section, because that's how it's functioning, right? Before it transitioned us into the chorus, here it's transitioning us into the bridge. But then I'm kind of like blending music terms, right? I've been very consistent with using kind of the verse chorus kind of terminology in this one. So I didn't want to do that. I thought pre chorus kind of works still here, like I said, because we get a detour to the bridge, but then we still land on the chorus, right? We don't get another pre chorus before the chorus because really this pre chorus is trying to take us to the chorus, and then we just had to take a little detour around the bridge, and now then we get to the chorus. So it still works as a pre-chorus, but really the function, the part that I want to leave you with, is the function this section has is a transition. Okay, it's transitioning us either to a chorus or to the bridge. That's what it does. So then we get the bridge here. There's some cool wordplay here, but wait, if I could shake the crushing weight of expectations. That's a nice like way to have the same word but completely different meanings, right? Even different spellings here. The other thing that's kind of cool about this section is she's talking about being free from the weight of expectations, right? Just like having this more sense of freedom. And the rhyme is like the rhyme structures are completely free here. We have some things that kind of help get that structure that we're looking for. But wait, shake, that's that same vowel sound as wait, crushing weight of expectations. Would that free up some room for joy or relaxation or simple pleasure? Okay, now then here we start getting rhymes again. But before that, right, we have a little bit here that helps us kind of latch onto something, but the rhymes are free. She's thinking about being free. I think it works in that kind of like almost word painting kind of way, right? We don't get really tight, strong rhymes because she's talking more about being free. And if you think about like how tight the rhymes have been, most of the time we're getting exact rhymes at the end of every line, right? That's the expectation. Wow, we are going to be exactly the same as what's come before, right? We're going to have that really strong kind of thing. But here now we have the freer rhymes and we get pleasure and measure and then pressure, right? All that we're missing is the zh sound here in the middle to make that work. Just like I said before, how we get different kind of consonant sounds, but we're still rhyming the vowels. And then keep growing, keep going, because all we know is. So we have the similar consonant with the g and the similar vowel, grow, go, right? Because all we know is. So similar to the beginning. If we were to kind of break this bridge up into sections, I would say we have these kind of 3 lines, and then we have these 2 lines, and then we have the last 2 lines. But wait, if I could shake the crushing weight of expectations, would that free up some room for joy? Or relaxation or simple pleasure. Instead, we measure this growing pressure, keeps growing, keep going, because all we know is. Like I said, not super strong as far as the rhymes are concerned, but there seems to be a reason for that. And what's kind of cool too, if you wanted to go a little bit deeper into how the actual sentences are structured, we have these first kind of 4 lines is the sentence. But wait, if I could shake the crushing weight of expectations, would that free up some room for joy or relaxation or simple pleasure? There's kind of our first idea. And then instead, we measure this growing pressure. Keeps growing, keep going, because all we know is, and then we get back into the chorus. So even though it's kind of broken up like into 2 parts by the sentence structure, the rhyme structure kind of bridges the gap, right? At the end of our first sentence, we have the rhyme that then gets us into our next sentence. So that helps to kind of keep that continuity going of these different parts of the bridge actually still kind of like all belong together. And then at the end, we get the chorus. It's the same thing. We have, stop and pop, A, A, B, B, C, C. And here we get, breaks and mistakes. So that's nice because we have also the S's rhyme. And this is an important detail because he could have said, watch as she buckles and bends, but never break. No mistakes. But see, by having the breaks, no mistakes, having the S sound be consistent makes it much stronger. And then again, just belongs to the next part of the chorus. Just pressure like a grip, grip, grip. And we get go and blow rhyming with whoa at the end. So once again, stronger rhymes are happening at the end. And then we get wonder, under, takes, breaks, mistakes, and then we finish with no pressure. So no pressure is really almost like the tag to the rhyme scheme here. We have the A A B B C C C and then D. That's our departure, right? This is the only time we have something at the chorus that sounds like an end rhyme, right? Before all the other stuff sounded like the just, it sounds like it picks up into the next part of the song. But no pressure is really kind of the cap on all of it. No cracks, no breaks, no mistakes, no pressure, and then that's it. Also, worth noting, no pressure is kind of a cliche, right? And I've talked a lot about how Lin-Manuel Miranda uses cliches pretty intentionally. And here, this makes sense, right? No pressure is something that you can say to, oh, you can come if you want, but no pressure. But here, it's not like used in that kind of context. Like it kind of is used in that context, but we've been talking about pressure this entire time, and like I don't know, it's just like it fits so well. It fits so well. So now that we've kind of talked about the structure, let's talk a little bit about some of the music stuff. Like I wanted to mention that the orchestration, which if you don't know what that means, that basically just means what instruments you choose to use, is different kind of throughout. Pretty much wherever you are in the song, if you have a good ear for what instruments are playing, you know where you would be in that song, which isn't necessarily true for a lot of like popular music. So like this last chorus, we don't get the kind of like tongue clicks in the first part. We get a lot more bass. And then the second part of this last chorus is much bigger. Like we think we get more strings and that type of thing than the first time we heard the chorus. So it is different how he used the instruments, or what we would say is the orchestration is different between those two choruses. So you could just kind of drop the needle per se on one of these choruses and would be able to identify which is which just by how the instruments are used, which I think is really great. That's a nice trick because it helps keep it fresh and interesting, right? Also, I wanted to point out that this bridge is in the relative major. So this whole piece is in the key of E minor. For the bridge, we take that detour into G major, which is just the relative major key. So our key signature stays exactly the same. I sometimes get people asking like, well, how do I know like what chords to use or what keys to use? And it's like, don't overthink it. Like this song works super well and it's mostly using diatonic chords, which means chords that belong in the key. And it just goes to the relative major for the bridge, which makes sense. We have all that minor tension. And then in the bridge, we get that kind of release of G major. We're talking about, a more hopeful, joyful kind of future. Like it just makes sense, right? You can use these kind of techniques. You don't have to think like, oh, well, maybe I can like try to do a major key that's a third above where I started, or like have a pattern or whatever. Like you can just go to the relative major and it's going to work out. Lin-Manuel Miranda is a great composer and he did that here and it works really well. This piece is really popular and as far as I know, a lot of people like it. So try not to overthink those kinds of things. As far as like what could be better here, I really only have one comment. I'll say this every video. It's hard to find room for improvement in Lin-Manuel Miranda's works. But you remember how I talked about no pressure is a cliche and he uses cliches pretty intentionally, like it fits so well here? There is one cliche that I don't think really works. So like, buckles and bends but never breaks. That's kind of like a phrase that you can use to not mean what you want it to mean, as in like, a bridge could bend and buckle and break, but in this case we're talking like a person bending and buckling and breaking, and they're not literally doing that, but like it makes sense because we've been talking about pressure this whole time, right? The one part that I don't think fits really well is, who am I if I can't run with the ball? How does running with the ball fit with everything else that we've seen so far? Like, it doesn't have to do with pressure. Like, we haven't talked about sports or anything else in here. So that's the one kind of cliche. Oh, run with the ball, like take it and run with the ball or whatever, that I don't think really works. It works well in the context of the rhyme scheme. That's not what I'm talking about. But as far as like using that phrase, I don't think it works as well. I mean, who am I if I can't carry it all? That's kind of like another turn of phrase that's common, but she's the strong one, right? Carrying is like part of her character. So maybe there was like even a prompt from the studio that said, we want, to showcase her athleticism or something. We have this scene where we're imagining her doing something with a ball. And so that was some inspiration for this line. Like, there could be some extra kind of influences that determined this line. But other than that, like, I don't think this line works especially well, especially compared to like all the other ways that he has used cliches and turns of phrases and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's my one comment of the whole thing. I mean, this piece is great. It's really well constructed. Worth listening to for sure. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you like this video, please remember to subscribe, hit that like button, check out my Patreon if you can. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you next time.